Hello, this is Nikki with 11th House Publishing, and I'm joined here with Angela Yuriko Smith. Say hi, Angela.
Hi, I'm excited to learn what we're going to learn about today.
And today we are taking our trip through the DSM-5 and taking a look at motor disorders. What is the astrological view on such things versus what is the psychological view? And it isn't really versus like a head-to-head. I like to say that I think we can learn from each other and how we come at it. So astrology comes at such things from a more spiritual aspect, and psychology from a more logical aspect. And I think there's a huge overlap. Carl Jung is the father of psychology. He got his archetypes from astrology. So I'm bringing it all full back circle in this series. And I'm going to start today just sort of doing a quick look at what an astrology chart looks like for those that might not be familiar with anything more than the zodiac sun sign, because there's a lot more to it. And I'm not going to go into everything, but I just want to give you an idea that, there's a whole wheel full of energies and they're all doing something. We're very complicated beings. And so, you've got your sun, like for today, the sun is in Libra. We are in a Libra solar new moon eclipse today. And so there's a big emphasis on relating and relationships and how we relate to each other. And I like to come at things with how can we be more compassionate and understanding? And so that's my intent with this series as well. So if you look at the chart here, I'm going to focus today on Mars, which is down here, and Saturn over here, and Uranus. And if you've been following this series so far, we've talked about Uranus quite a bit in terms of its outside of the box energy, because that's 11th house, but also it's the lightning bolt. It rules the nervous system. So there's a direct tie in there to any sort of motor disorder, where you're making movements that you don't want to sporadically, or just have tics or twitches and stuff, or maybe say things that you didn't mean to. You can see how having a nervous system that's either hyperactive or maybe not active enough, depending on the situation, could cause some of these things. And so that's what you'll see there, at least what I've seen. I've been doing astrology for about 10 years now, and I've seen the charts of clients who have different levels of motor disorders, and these are some of the things I've seen. I'm sure there's more. If you have experience on any end of that spectrum, I'd like to hear your comments below, because I want to grow with this series as well and understand it myself from different angles. So every personal story certainly helps. But Mars and Uranus combinations, so you can see how today they're not really talking to each other today. So this wouldn't apply, but today you've got Saturn, Mars, and Venus all talking to each other in what's called a grand water trine. And so this is harmonious energy. I wouldn't expect there to be any disorders coming out of this particular energy, but it is kind of funny that we're talking about it today. It's like, let's get this information out there. And I always find that interesting. With astrology, you can look at timing on things to understand how best to go with the flow of energy. And when, we have free will, so you can always buck the system and go against it. But at least when you're getting into the river that you're walking upstream,
Yeah. You're going to have a bad day.
Yeah, so, you can couple what we've talked about with the Uranian nervous system energy then with the Mars, just like with Mercury, right? Having that expanded neural network. Only this is also, maybe there's a hard aspect with Mars where it's just on the fritz a bit more. And so what we know about the Uranian energy, because it's all a spectrum, all of these energies. And so on the negative end of the spectrum, it can be like short circuiting and out of control and causing all kinds of issues. But if you can get it calmed down on the higher level of it and understand how to work with that and elevate it, You can help at least mitigate some of these things, because sometimes it'll be in your chart that you are born with, but maybe a Mars Uranus opposition, and that can give you just like being clumsy your whole life, right? Feel like you're just a little off in how you're coming at this physical form. And while you can calm the nervous system, it's always going to be something that you're going to have to kind of be aware of in your energy. But that can, again, there can be that level of acceptance. So, and then there's also the Saturnian energy, which we haven't talked about as much, but it's more constrictive. And I should say that Mars is our action, our drive, our get up and go, our physical body. And just for those that don't know, this is my second time recording this today, so I'm trying to have to remember what I already said. Mars is our anger and frustration.
I'm recording this twice.
I'm recording this twice. And Saturn, so I've heard it put by Rick Levine, who's a pretty well-known astrologer, that Mars is like our gas pedal and Saturn is like the brake. And so if you have these two together in such a way in your chart, or like eyeing each other funny, it can be kind of like you're pressing both down at once and burning out. So it could be a matter of maybe your system is just overloaded, and can we have more empathy for that? Maybe not try to put as much on you. And I know people that suffer from different motor disorders, they get more flares the more stress they get, right? That tends to be the case. So even just holding that compassion, but then understanding maybe where some of these things can come from. So astrology would look at it and be like, well, Saturn is constricting, so you could have had a constricting parental figure early on that maybe constricted your movement in some way. Or maybe a situation, doesn't have to be a person, but like you weren't allowed free access as a kid to just flit around and get to know your body, And so, or maybe you were sick, maybe you're sick and bedridden and not able to move. And so these things can then contribute later on to not knowing and not having spatial awareness. Or perhaps, as a kid, it's a memory you don't even remember. You dropped a cup, it shattered, made a giant mess, and World War III broke out in your house because of it, because of, somebody who's on edge or whatever. And so somewhere in your subconscious mind, which can start to run the show, well, it's 95% of what we do, right?
Yeah.
Your system might be going, well, I don't know how to hold a cup. I don't know how to do that. Silly as that might seem, it can come down to stuff like that. And so that's how astrology looks at it. It's like, well, what is the root cause of some of these energies in the negative? Like, how are they showing in there? And how can we raise that frequency up? Because if you can get that frequency up more, it could be very much I can control. So you can see how it's like goes from I'm not in control, I clearly can't hold a cup, right? And how that becomes ingrained to Saturn can also, on the flip side, be very structured, ordered, disciplined. Like, I'm going to hold this cup. I'm going to, and every day I'm going to work at it. And I think people that have these various disorders, some of them really do, like they can attest to that. The stuff that they took a long time to overcome. But I would imagine if I looked into some of their charts, I'd find these energies. That's what I would expect in an energy. And then eventually they learn how to hold that cup, and maybe even sometimes you hear these stories, right, where they struggled really as a child and now they're like playing the harp,
Yeah.
stuff like that they really got these fine motor skills developed over time from a very adversarial childhood. So that also can be interesting. And I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case, but there's a different viewpoint, a different place to start, I think, than just being like, well, this is something that you're stuck with. Because the way the birth chart works is this is our energetic blueprint. So a child born in Port Washington at 6:30 today, this would be their birth chart. So these are the energies they're working with. Now, we have free will to decide what our frequency is going to be. At any given moment, you can decide to change. So it may come easier or harder depending on your blueprint, right? Like if you have a blueprint for a desk and you're trying to make a chair, you
Yeah.
know, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you. Although you can sit on a desk, I suppose, but you get what I'm saying. Like, so the gift that I think astrology can give everybody, whether or not you have motor disorders, but I think is especially, to people with these disorders, is an acceptance that it's not, that it's just your blueprint, that it's not something that can't be overcome, or it's not something you did, or it's that sort of thing, that sort of acceptance. And I think just having that spiritual upliftment and that different mindset can go a long way to calming that nervous system, to reconnecting to yourself from that subconscious. You know. So I think that rather than just dismiss it as something that, it's all just motor difficulties. I mean, it's in the DSM-5 for a reason, right? This
Yeah.
psychological book. So I think that there's a recognition even within them that this is a psychological phenomenon. So did you have any questions, Angela?
No, I really love how you explain it, because you really approach it from kind of a all angles 360 holistic kind of way to look at it, instead of I think, and as totally not a professional at all of either of these, like psychology or astrology, you're blending the sciences to get like more of a multifaceted kind of understanding of it, which I really appreciate.
Yes. Well, thank you. So to
Yeah, these are super interesting.
go back to my original thing. We got to tick disorders on the first one through.
Oh,
But the diagnostic criteria goes over a lot of what I've already covered. They're looking at how much of this is a problem now, the onset of it, usually from an early developmental period, and that kind of jives with what astrology says about looking back at those early years and those connections. Could it be that things like hypnotherapy could help people? Like if it does come down again to use that cup analogy, is it something that you don't even remember because you were like one,
yeah.
And how great would that be to be like, that's what it is. And if we can start connecting these neurons in a different way and take it out of the trauma, and because we're very neuroplastic. That's the good thing that science has been learning, right? That we can overturn these things.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've
And
got, go ahead, Angela.
I was just gonna interject. I think that we used to think that the brain couldn't heal, and that's something recently that we've understood, is the brain actually can reform itself, which is kind of along what you're saying, retraining the brain.
Exactly. And it all comes down to traumas at the end of the day. A lot of the stuff in the DSM-5 and how we choose to process them rather than like stuff them down or do the shaming for whatever it
Yeah.
is, making it a you problem or a personal thing. It's like, no, let's take a look at this as a holistic thing and how we can, work within it. So let's see, we've got the acquisition and execution of coordinated motor skills is substantially below that expected age and opportunity for skill learning and use. So a lot of times you'll be looking at not just is it like how debilitating is this stuff? And in astrology, you might have somebody who has a conjunction of Uranus and uh, Mars in, let's say, your first house. So the first house is you, and Mars is also a very physical you, right? And then you have Uranus there, and if they're like right conjuncted, exactly the same degree, you might get somebody who's just all nerves all the time, right? And so that's going to be a harder thing to overcome and get working correctly because they are dealing on levels that we aren't used to. So it's not saying that it can't be something that we can find ways to make their life more comfortable, but it is recognizing that the base level, you've got these energies that are all about just being wild and doing your own thing and being sporadic, and it's, you know, maybe all these weird movements coming out at inappropriate times. Can we do things like go for a run to get the energy out, or do some sort of physical activity in an outside the box way? Because that's the energy that Uranus demands. It says, okay, you've got this problem, find a new solution to it. You know, and you'll find that sometimes, a lot of times, with parents who are like, they're at their wits' end with a system that doesn't know how to handle whatever it is, and so they try different things. And maybe it's a change in diet that helps calm the system down, or the EMDR, the rapid eye movement desensitization, which helps rewire the brain. You know, could that then be used for motor disorders, because they're, you know, it's could still be coming from that space of a trauma response, right? And astrology even makes room for like some of the stuff coming from past lives. You know, so if we want to get into that spiritual aspect, even if it isn't something where the cup was dropped in this life, could it be something that's carried over? You know, and that I leave up to you. You know, I just report. But yeah, and they're looking at, you know, to be a motor disorder, it can't be better explained by an intellectual disability. But I do think that there's a fair amount of overlap in this. And I found, if I haven't already said it, and if I'm repeating this, I apologize, but like to have somebody who was constricted as a child then be able to, as an adult, do something more structured like dance and yoga, right? So this can help them learn their body, even if it's, you know, at 50 years old. They're learning their body in a different way. And sometimes that can just make those connections, you know, especially bringing spirit and spirituality into things, in ways that can be very, very healing and freeing. So outside of the box thinking, I think all around is what I'm all about.
Yeah. So it makes it so interesting because you really are presenting it from a very unique perspective, a very Uranus perspective.
Yes, full disclosure, I have Uranus in my first house. So, and I do, like, I have some of these behaviors right here, like body rocking. It's not super, super severe, but I don't have my ascendant degree conjunct Uranus. They're apart. They're in the same house, so I'm off the wall. I got my autism and my ADHD going, and that comes from a few different things. But they're not talking to each other in the same way that I actually know somebody who has a very similar chart to mine, and she has the conjunction that's very close. It's like a degree or two away. And she has a lot more problems with like being clumsy and dropping things and stuff. And it's become a problem. And like even her speech, she tends to have a kind of shake to her voice, you know. So it is interesting that you can see and compare even within how close those energies are to conjuncting each other, or how they're speaking to each other in terms of degrees. Makes sense. So there's a little tidbit I didn't dive into in the last one. So this video is a little different. Let's see here. Yeah, like you've got handshaking, body rocking, head banging, self-biting, hitting your own body, you know, and where can the spiritual aspects of this stuff come in, of making you feel better in your own skin? Because that could also be, you know, at play too, like feeling disconnected from the body so that it doesn't, you don't mind hurting it because it doesn't feel like you. Or where does that come from? Uranian energy because the planet Uranus comes from outside the solar system, and so it's got this alien energy to it, and so there can be this feeling with certain Mars interactions that you're not of this world, and so what do you care? You might not feel pain the same way, you know.
Yeah.
So if it's just again a matter of acceptance, um, you know, that can be something that can be offered in a myriad of ways, not just through astrology, but something to consider. And I think, again, instead of just going to stop it, stop doing what that is. Well, that's not helpful.
Yeah. Behave yourself.
Mm-hmm. All right. And I think that about covers it. And we went a little bit into the Tourette's, and I think that there's an overlap there with Mercury, which I've talked about a lot in the other episodes, but Mercury is our communication. And so if you have Mercury and Mars and Uranus all speaking together in a not so harmonious way, I could see that also going straight to, oh, that came out of my mouth. And again, it's because the wiring inside is such that you're connecting things that maybe aren't just socially acceptable. And it can be kind of scary. I mean, you think about sleepwalking,
Yeah.
and so it's basically that subconscious part of the brain has control in a way, um, that, how can we help to calm things so that it doesn't take over, or help, because you can think of the subconscious as an ocean. It can be very, very turbulent, especially if there's a lot of gunk in there that you haven't dealt with. And probably if you're dealing with some of these motor disorders, you got a lot of gunk. Got a lot of stuff to unpack. A lot of psychological trauma just from being you over time, having to deal with people's reactions to some of these things,
Yeah.
And so I'd imagine it just piles onto itself and doesn't help. And so it's a coming back to self and getting right and feeling good in the body that I think can also really help. So whether that's through dance, through yoga, through somatic therapies, which they're finally starting to actually embrace this in the field of psychology a bit more. And so that is very good. But and you can read, the Tourette's stuff too. And it's a lot of the same stuff. It's just involuntary, like your body's just doesn't feel like your own,
Yeah.
And so that's just got to be really frustrating. And how can we help you feel more in tune with yourself? And I think there's a lot that astrology can offer in terms of that. So I think that's where I'll end things, though. Did you have any questions, Angela?
No, just I really love listening to these. It puts the whole experience into like such a different light. And I do like how you point out at the beginning of this that even though this isn't our charts, we're not helpless. It's just more like learning to work with this. Like if you're short, I am short, it's not something I have to fight against, but I can learn to work with it and use tools and, don't put things on high shelves, and then my life is much easier.
There you go. Exactly. Though that's a perfect example. Thank you. Yeah, there's an acceptance of this is my blueprint. This is what I'm working with.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. I feel like that's also what you're saying is like there's nothing wrong with this, whatever it is that you have.
Yeah.
Because it's who you are.
Exactly. And certainly at the end of the day, no matter how severe some of these energies are and how hard they are to work with, because in my experience, quite honestly, nobody gets off scot-free. Like I've seen thousands of charts at this point, and even celebrities that you're like, oh, they have a great life. They've usually gone through quite a bit themselves. So
Yeah.
Everybody's got their challenges in life, and if we can have that blueprint to know what they might be, we can maybe vibrate to the higher level of these energies, which Uranus is all about freedom, doing things outside the box. So maybe again, you get those parents that want their kid to be able to, not get in trouble all the time, and so they come up with outside the box ways to approach it.
Yeah.
whatever they might be. And that pushes the envelope on these things. And so that's like working with the energy in the higher form of it, instead of fighting against it and being like, no, you have to conform and be in the system, when that's not Uranian energy, right?
Yeah.
Or getting too tight and controlling with the Saturn energy. And that's not, that's not going to get you anywhere either. Again, it does to me a lot of these disorders, because Uranus actually rules disorder and chaos. It's here to get us moving and trying things and evolving. And so if we can come at it from that aspect of, how can we do things differently? I think you're going to find you're going with the flow easier. Hard as some of these things are, and I don't want to discount that. Some of them can get quite severe. But for some folks who are also just dealing with like maybe something where doing a meditation before a stressful event could help, and they didn't
Yeah.
really think of it like that because we're not quite there yet as a society. So I hope that somebody can get some help out of this. Let me know in the comments below if this is something that you or somebody that you care about deals with. What your thoughts on all of this stuff is that I've just been talking about. I'm always learning and growing, so always interested to see. I've been an astrologer for 10 years, and if you find that you like my style, I am offering readings through 11th House Publishing as part of our fundraising efforts. So I'll put the link below for that. And 11th House Publishing is very Uranian itself. It's outside the box, trying to amplify neurodivergent voices and use the profits to amplify neurodivergent ideas and education, just getting out there that we all think differently, just like we move differently, right? So it may be like just having the space for that some people just need to move a little bit more than others for whatever reason. And why do they have to sit
Yeah.
for so long? Can we have compassion for the different types of blueprints that are out there, at the end of the day, and not take it as like a personal affront
Yeah.
to authority? You did not sit there for 8 hours straight,
You're not listening.
you're not listening, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that was always my gripe with the you're not listening thing. Just because I'm not looking at you, I'm not listening, because listening is with your ears, not your eyes.
Oh, devastating. You
Yeah.
said that to people more than once, I'm sure, right?
Do I?
You've said that to people more than once. Like,
Yeah, I've gotten in trouble because also that apparently is smarting off. That's a valid question.
it is a valid question. Yes. We were talking about how you spent a lot of time out in the hallway as a kid.
Yes. Yeah, these valid questions are not great sometimes. Not received well. I'm going to say you should still ask them, but they're not received well all the time.
Yeah, and so that's what people are up against, I think, too, just trying to
Mhm.
sometimes work within a system that doesn't allow them to just be their eccentric selves,
Mhm.
depending on the severity. Because I do understand, like, obviously, if somebody's banging their head against a wall, like,
Yeah.
that's pretty severe, but where does that come from? Is it
Mhm.
feeling disconnected from the self? How can we help them feel or more connected? And so
Yeah.
comment on them is the solution, and it's complex. I get it, but it's thinking outside the box like this, which is why I'm hoping to have these discussions more and more. So
Yeah. And that's why I'm here for it, because I love this and I love what you're doing and I love what you're doing with 11th house. And so, yeah,
yeah.
I'm on the train.
And if you would like to join in the discussion, we go live every Wednesday at 6:30 at the Authortunities Hub, which is a fantastic algorithm-free group for authors. Although I don't know if we turn anybody away, really.
No, because we've got some artists in there now. We've got a sculptor and a game designer, but we're all rotating around words, the love of language, so, and
Yeah,
story.
creativity. I find creativity to
Yeah.
be the ultimate
Yeah.
act of subversion, no matter how you do it. I say write a smiley face on a napkin and you've done a subversive act.
Yeah.
So, but the Opportunities Hub is great. It's part of the Mighty Network, which is like a social network, but because it's a private thing, it's more like the forums from back in the day, where it's more individualistic. There's no like Facebook drama algorithms trying to, stir things up. You can kind of make it your own. It's just, I don't know. I feel it's cozy in a way that
Yeah,
some of the other places aren't. So
yeah,
I'll
it's
put
relaxing.
I'll put a link for that below, and I'd love to have people join in the discussion live. I'm skipping through the whole DSM-5, and I think that we have schizotypical disorders coming up next. So if you want to get in on that discussion, I'd love to have you in the audience and pop in your 2 cents. And if 11th house is something that you would like to get involved in, we'd love to have you as well. So other than that, did you have anything else you wanted to say, Angela?
No, just like I love that you're doing this. This is super interesting, and I'm curious as to what we're gonna learn about next week.
All right. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next week. Take care.
Bye.
Stop recording. Oh, that one was better.